Today is the first day that I was able to accomplish my complete schedule for the first time in a long time. Ever since I've gotten back from Japan, which was about 6 weeks ago now at this point, I've been struggling to basically get back on schedule, basically to feel like me again. I remember being pretty close around the 2 week, 3 week mark. That's when I actually recorded the first episode of this series right here, this podcast. But for some odd reason, I just fell back into this somewhat depression, this state of being where I kept seeking out some form of external stimulation, some form of reward by either watching movies, TV shows, occasionally even playing games, which I haven't done in a long time. And I think all of it sort of reached a tipping point. It helped reach this tipping point, which is ironic in a way because it's all the bad stuff, all the stuff that were keeping me distracted and making me feel unproductive and bad that pushed me to reach a point where I'm back at it again. I'm recording this podcast. I'm actually going to hit my first day where I listed a whole bunch of habits that I had to do. I think there's about like 10 of them, maybe more. And it's the first day since I got back from Japan where I've accomplished all of them in this day. Managed to wake up early, managed to go on a run, managed to exercise, practice piano, did some podcast editing and scheduling. I practiced Japanese, and I'm also recording this podcast. So it was definitely a lot. And not only that, I was very, very close to not recording this podcast or this episode because there were ants in my house because it's the summertime. And I think it was the second time that ants have come into my house. Luckily, maybe it's the way this house is designed. It's very difficult for them to get in. But they managed this time, and I spent about 2 hours just cleaning things up, trying to get rid of them because we had to clear out the cupboard in order to get all the ants. So I was very, very frustrated about that because it sort of made this day a lot harder, a lot more imperfect, I suppose, just because there was time wasted. And to top it off, I went outside to check where the ants came from, and unfortunately, I guess I just spent too much time being still at a certain point, allowing a mosquito to bite my hand. And for me, I don't get many mosquito bites, so I was very, very annoyed, especially since I use my hands quite a lot. And to feel that stingy feeling while using my hands, that's going to be annoying. So for a bit after that happened, I was kind of just discouraged, but I figured that I should really just finish this off since it was the last thing on my list, and it would be a bummer to just not do it because of some ants and mosquitoes. But this episode is a bit more than this topic. It's about going from chaos to order, being disorganized to becoming more organized. And I think I've noticed a pattern in my life that I've definitely mentioned before where I've had these spells, these periods of times where I'm very distracted. I'm very consumed by watching entertainment and playing games to the point where I do it way too much and feel terrible, making it more natural for me to want to do more things that make me feel productive and good and to disconnect myself from those things that have been sort of messing with my brain chemically. It's this cycle of going back and forth between being lucid, having this lucidity, and being trapped in a fog, back and forth, back and forth. And I remember back then, there would be longer periods of time where I was in that fog, perhaps for like a month. And then I would have maybe 2 weeks or so of good focused productivity. And then I would go back to that fog. Then this was around like high school. And over time, when it became college and after college, I noticed that that cycle began to flip. What would happen is the foggy periods would become perhaps a week or two, and the productive periods of my life would become closer to a month or so. And eventually it reached a point where it was almost as if those unproductive times were just 2 or 3 days, and then I would have productive periods that lasted for about a month or two. So that was probably my peak productivity state. I would say that was around the time of maybe before 2020, before certain events happened that made my emotional state a bit unstable. But either way, after coming back from Japan, I've been in this foggy period and this productive period for a shorter amount of time and then back to the foggy period. So I'm sort of experiencing it all over again. And I just need to flip it to the point where I did reach that peak productivity state before, making the foggy period very little and making the productive very long. But I do think that it's a good idea to remember that this is a cycle. It's pretty close to impossible to not allow some sort of distractions or entertainment in my life because those are just things that I naturally want to partake in. There are shows, there are stories that I just enjoy and I want to continue to enjoy them. And I do think that it's enriching to my life to enjoy those good stories. However, I can't let them take over my life. There's always that balance that needs to be maintained. And a part of me feels like that balance is obviously different for everyone, but at the same time, it's sort of set by what you've become used to. I think right now, my body and my mind is very, very used to being stimulated because I've been in a very, very fast-paced, stimulated lifestyle while I was in Japan. And while I'm here at home in California, I feel very, very not stimulated. So for a while, I just had to get used to that. And I think I am used to it now. This boredom that I'm feeling, it's really, really hard to deal with, to be honest. And I can feel myself wanting to reach for my phone or my body just wanting some sort of extra stimulus, mostly from entertainment. But I'm just going to do my best not to give it that so that I can return to a much more calm state and sort of bring my balance back to being able to withstand a bit more boredom. I actually do think the reason why I do any of this, the podcast stuff, the YouTube stuff, creating my own music, my original piano pieces, all of it is because I am bored. And this is probably going to be a topic eventually for some other episode because it's a big one. But the summary is essentially like, while I was in Japan, I didn't do any of that because, or at least for the second half of it, I didn't do any of it because it just became way too difficult to maintain. So I just did the thing that I felt was the easiest and the most fun, which was seeing my friends that I made there, hanging out with them, going out, seeing nice places, eating great food. I was like never bored basically. But now that I am again, I feel myself actually wanting to do what I used to do, the YouTube stuff, the music stuff, everything. So in a way, the boredom itself just creates space for deciding what I actually want to do to not be bored. And the decision to fill that space and relieve that boredom with just watching movies and TV shows is probably one of the least fulfilling in the end. So that's why I'm trying my best to avoid it. But anyways, back to the normal topic. Chaos has reigned over my life for a very long time now, and my life has been chaotic. I've been a mess for the past month and a half. Now it's time to just get things back in order, and doing this is a part of it. Just speaking what's on my mind and being as best as I can be, being lucid with my actions and my thoughts. That's the only way I'm going to be able to gain some sort of order. Even if certain things happen, like the ants and the mosquitoes, I just got to keep trying. And I just got to accept that there will be cycles of foggy periods as well as productive periods. I just got to learn how to get back up really quickly, like I used to be able to. I have this thing written on my whiteboard that I used to try to look at every day. I haven't been doing that lately, but it basically just says, I will fall again, but I'll do so in the best way possible by giving it my all, while giving it my all. So while giving it my all, I know I'm going to fail eventually, but once I do fail or fall, I'm just going to pick myself back up and try again. And I think that statement helps me because it makes the fall easier to handle, knowing that it will happen and knowing that when it does happen, I'm forgiving myself quickly so that I can just use that energy and try harder the next time. Okay, I think that's it for this one.